Hey, sleepers. Tonight, we're peeling back the classified files of the human mind. We are in a quiet, cool room, somewhere deep in the Virginia suburbs of the 1970s. The air is thick with the scent of ozone and warm electronics. A large machine, the size of a small car, hums a low, steady note. On its face, a single green line jitters across a dark screen, a tiny electric heartbeat. This is the frontier, not of space, but of the mind. And someone is trying to draw a map. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. It helps us continue our journey into these quiet corners of history. And while you're at it, we'd love to know where you're listening from. Please share your location and local time in the comments below. It's a wonderful feeling to know our community of curious minds is spread all across the sleeping world. So, close your eyes, take a deep breath, and get ready to drift off as we explore the chilling technology and suppressed potential of the mind-reading machine. Let's begin our story, not with the machine itself, but with the people who dreamed it into existence. Our story starts with an idea, an agency, an acronym that sounds both official and a little bit mysterious. DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. Picture the world in 1958. The night sky, which had always been a canvas for stars and dreams, suddenly had a new man-made moon. A tiny beeping sphere called Sputnik, launched by the Soviet Union. For the United States, this was more than just a scientific achievement for a rival. It was a profound shock, a technological Pearl Harbor. It felt as though they had been caught sleeping while the future was being written in another language. In response, President Eisenhower created DARPA. Its mission was simple and yet impossibly grand: to prevent technological surprises like Sputnik from ever happening again, and to create some technological surprises of their own. DARPA was not like other government agencies. It wasn't meant to be slow or bureaucratic or safe. It was designed to be a place for big, risky ideas. Imagine a wealthy, eccentric, and very brilliant uncle who gives his favorite nieces and nephews a huge allowance, but with one condition: they must use it to invent something that has never been seen before, something that might change the world, or, just as likely, might fail spectacularly. That was DARPA. They funded the people who were thinking 10, 20, even 50 years ahead of everyone else. They were the architects of the impossible. And it was DARPA that gave us the early foundations of the Internet, of GPS, of stealth technology. They were dreamers, backed by the full weight of the U.S. government. Now let's drift forward in time into the 1970s. The world has changed. The initial shock of Sputnik has settled into a long, quiet, and deeply anxious struggle. The Cold War. This wasn't a war of loud battles and marching armies. It was a war fought in the shadows. A war of spies, secrets, and whispers. A war of intelligence. Both sides, the United States and the Soviet Union, were constantly searching for an edge, any edge that could give them an advantage. In this atmosphere of deep paranoia, the focus began to shift. It wasn't just about building faster jets or more powerful missiles. The new frontier was something far more complex and far more intimate. It was the human mind, the ultimate black box. Think about it. If you could know what your adversary was thinking, what their plans were, what their true intentions were, that would be the ultimate intelligence coup. It would be checkmate in the grand chess game of global politics. So, the question began to be whispered in the halls of power. in the secure labs funded by DARPA, could we understand the brain? Not just in a medical sense, to cure diseases, but in an operational sense. Could we look inside a person's head and see what was happening? Could we detect a lie, not with a clumsy polygraph that measured sweat and heart rate, but by looking at the lie as it formed in the brain itself? Could we tell if a pilot was about to panic under stress? Could we, in our wildest dreams, actually read a thought? This was the fertile ground from which our story grows. A powerful agency built to chase the impossible. A global atmosphere of intense suspicion and the most profound mystery in the known universe. The 3-pound gelatinous organ sitting inside every human skull. The brain. The stage was set for one of the most secret and controversial chapters in the history of science. The quest for a mind-reading machine. And as you settle deeper into your pillow, let that quiet hum of the 1970s machinery fill the space around you. A gentle, steady sound to carry you into the heart of our story. Before we can understand the dream of reading minds, we have to understand the tools they had to work with. And in the 1970s, the tools were, by our modern standards, quite humble. They were like trying to understand the intricate plot of a grand opera by listening to it through a thick stone wall. You can hear the loud parts and the quiet parts, the crescendos and the lulls, but the specific words, the beautiful melodies, are lost to you. The primary tool of the era was the electroencephalograph, or EEG. It's a long word, but the idea behind it is wonderfully simple. Your brain is a city of billions of tiny cells called neurons. And just like a city, it's never truly silent. Neurons talk to each other using tiny sparks of electricity. It's a constant, shimmering electrical conversation. An EEG doesn't go inside your brain to listen. Instead, it places small metal discs, or electrodes, on the outside of your scalp. It's a gentle process. These electrodes are like sensitive microphones, listening for the collective hum of all that electrical chatter happening just beneath the skull. Think of it like this. Imagine a giant stadium filled with 100,000 people. From high above in a blimp, you can't hear any single person's conversation, but you can hear the roar of the crowd. You can tell when they all cheer at once. You can tell when they gasp. You can tell when they break into a slow rhythmic clap. The EEG was that blimp. It couldn't hear a single thought, a single neuron's whisper, but it could hear the overall rhythm of the brain. Scientists had already discovered that these rhythms, or brain waves, changed depending on what a person was doing. When you are relaxed, with your eyes closed, your brain produces smooth, gentle waves called alpha waves. It's like the slow, steady rhythm of a calm sea. When you are awake, alert, and focused on a task, your brain shifts to faster, more jagged waves called beta waves. It's the sound of a busy, bustling city. The person who first discovered these waves was a German psychiatrist named Hans Berger, a man who deserves a quiet moment in our story. He was a persistent, almost obsessive scientist. For years, he worked in relative obscurity, trying to record the brain's faint electrical signals. Many of his colleagues thought he was chasing a ghost, but he believed there was something there. In the 1920s, he finally succeeded, using his own son as a test subject, and he was the one who gave the alpha and beta waves their names. His discovery was the very first window into the live, working human brain. It was a monumental achievement, born from quiet dedication. So, by the 1970s, scientists using EEG could reliably tell if someone was awake, asleep, relaxed, or concentrating. This was amazing, but it was a long, long way from reading minds. It was like knowing a book is a comedy or a tragedy, but not being able to read a single word in it. But there were other, newer ideas percolating in the research world. Concepts that were the seeds of technologies we know well today. One of these was the idea of tracking blood flow. This is a wonderfully intuitive concept. Think about your own body. If you go for a run, which muscles need more blood? Your leg muscles, of course. The blood carries oxygen and energy to the parts of your body that are working the hardest. The researchers of the 1970s reasoned that the brain must work the same way. When a certain part of the brain is working hard, say, the part that processes vision when you look at a picture, it must need more blood, more oxygen. So if you could invent a machine that could see where the blood was flowing in the brain, you could create a map of which parts were active at any given moment. This is the fundamental idea behind what we now call functional magnetic resonance imaging, or fMRI. In the 1970s, fMRI, as we know, it didn't exist yet. The technology was in its infancy. It was like the first tentative sketches of a grand masterpiece, but the idea was there. And for an agency like DARPA, an idea was often enough. They weren't interested in the tools of today. They were interested in the tools of tomorrow. So the goal for these secret projects was to take these crude tools and push them to their absolute limits. Could they refine the EEG? Could they find a subtle signature in the brain's rhythms that corresponded not just to alertness, but to a specific emotion like fear or recognition? For example, if they showed a spy 100 photos, and one of them was a picture of a secret contact, would their brain produce a tiny, unique flicker of recognition that the EEG could pick up? A flicker so fast, the person might not even be aware of it themselves. This was the theory. They were trying to find a tell, a neurological poker face giveaway. They weren't trying to decode the sentence, "That man is my secret contact, Dmitri." They were trying to detect a faint internal aha moment. It was less like reading a mind and more like being a detective looking for tiny, almost invisible clues. And so, these early technologies, the humble EEG and the nascent dream of blood flow mapping, became the pickaxes and shovels for a daring expedition. An expedition into the very landscape of human thought. The technology was limited, yes. The challenge was immense. But the potential prize, a key to the locked room of the mind, was too tempting for the dreamers at DARPA to ignore. And as you relax, imagine those gentle alpha waves, the calm rhythm of your own resting mind, a peaceful, private ocean that for a time some of the most powerful people in the world sought to map. Now, let us step out of the light of the public university lab and into the shadows. We are entering the world of classified projects, of research conducted behind closed doors, in secure facilities where the official purpose was often vague and the true goals known only to a select few. This is where the legend of the mind-reading machine was born. Historical records are, by their very nature, incomplete. Secrets, especially military secrets, are designed to stay secret. But through declassified documents, through the careful work of historians, and through the occasional leak from someone who was there, a picture begins to form. And the picture shows that during the 1970s, DARPA was indeed funding a number of projects deep in the field of neuroscience. The names of these programs were often sterile and bureaucratic, like Advanced Human Information Processing, or biocybernetics. They don't sound like a mind-reading project. But that's the point. The most sensitive work is often hidden behind the most boring name. It's like calling a project to build a spaceship Advanced Aeronautical Vehicle Research. It's not untrue, but it certainly doesn't tell the whole story. One of the most famous, or infamous, forays by the intelligence community into the paranormal was Project Stargate. This was a CIA-funded program with some DARPA involvement that investigated remote viewing. The idea was to see if a person, a viewer, could sit in a quiet room in Maryland and psychically see what was happening at a secret missile silo in the Soviet Union. Now, whether you believe in psychic powers or not is beside the point. What Project Stargate shows us, with crystal clarity, is the mindset of the time. These agencies were so desperate for an edge that they were willing to fund research into the furthest, most speculative fringes of human potential. If they were willing to try and use psychic powers to spy, it is not just plausible, but almost certain that they were also exploring a more scientific route to the same goal, decoding the signals of the brain itself. So what did these alleged experiments look like? Let's paint a picture based on the fragments we know. Imagine a volunteer, perhaps a soldier from a nearby military base, told he's participating in a study to improve pilot concentration. He is led into a small, soundproofed room. The air is cool. The only furniture is a comfortable chair and a small screen. A technician, maybe a young, brilliant neuroscientist we'll call Dr. Evelyn Reed, gently attaches the EE electrodes to his scalp using a sticky, conductive gel. She has a calm, reassuring demeanor. The experiment begins. A series of simple images flashes on the screen. A dog, a car, a house, a tree. The green line on the monitoring machine in the next room jitters along. Dr. Reed and her team are watching, not for anything dramatic, but for tiny, repeatable patterns. Does the brain's electrical music change in a consistent way for a picture of an animal versus a picture of an inanimate object? It's a painstaking, tedious process. Hundreds of trials, thousands of data points, all fed into a massive, room-sized computer that hums and clicks as it churns through the numbers. Then, the stimuli might get more complex. The soldier might be asked to perform a simple mental task. Silently count backwards from 100 by sevens. Or, imagine you are flying your jet through a storm. The team is hunting for the neural signature of concentration, of stress, of visual imagination. Now, let's imagine the next phase, the part that would have been most highly classified, the application. A new volunteer is brought in. This person is suspected of being a double agent. He is shown a series of photos. Most are random faces. But one is the face of his suspected a handler. The question is simple. When the handler's face appears on screen, does the suspect's brain produce that telltale flicker of recognition they had worked so hard to identify? The P300 wave, as it would come to be known. A tiny electrical spike that occurs about 300 milliseconds after seeing something familiar and significant. This wasn't about reading the thought, "Oh no, they know about Agent Johnson." It was about detecting a biological reflex, an involuntary spark of recognition in the brain's wiring. It was a high-tech lie detector, using the brain itself as the witness. These projects were often collaborations. DARPA would provide the funding and the objective. Universities, like Stanford Research Institute or UCLA, would provide the brainpower and the laboratories. And private contractors would build the specialized equipment. It was a triangle of innovation, with each point connected by secure phone lines and sealed envelopes. Dr. Evelyn Reed, our imagined neuroscientist, might have joined the project with pure scientific curiosity, a chance to work with unlimited funding and cutting-edge technology to unlock the secrets of the brain. But as the applications shifted from general research to specific intelligence gathering, a quiet unease might have begun to creep in. Where was the line between understanding the brain and violating a person's inner world? It's a question that likely haunted the real scientists involved, working in the quiet, humming labs where the most ambitious project of all was underway. The attempt to build a bridge into the human mind. And as you rest, feel the safety and privacy of your own mind, a space that is yours and yours alone, a silent kingdom whose borders are, for now, still secure. Now that we've glimpsed the ambition of these secret projects, it's time for a gentle dose of reality. It's important to separate the paranoid whispers of the Cold War from the scientific facts on the ground. The truth is, in the 1970s, the idea of a true mind-reading machine was pure science fiction. The technology was simply not up to the task. The grand dream collided with a wall of scientific and technical limitations. Let's return to our analogy of the brain as a stadium full of people. The EEG, our listening device, could tell us if the crowd was cheering or booing. But the DARPA projects wanted more. They wanted to know why the crowd was cheering. Did their team score? Did a famous celebrity walk onto the field? Did someone just propose on the giant screen? The EEG alone couldn't tell you the difference. A cheer is a cheer. The signal was too broad, too general. This is what scientists call a low signal-to-noise ratio. Imagine you're trying to listen to a tiny, delicate wind chime in the middle of a hurricane. The beautiful, subtle sound of the chime is the signal, the specific thought or brain pattern you're looking for. The roaring wind of the hurricane is the noise, the billions of other random neural firings that are happening in the brain at every single moment. The brain is thinking about the itch on your nose, the temperature of the room, what you had for breakfast, that song stuck in your head, all at the same time. Trying to pick out one specific thought from that chaotic storm of activity with 1970s technology was like trying to catch a single specific raindrop in that hurricane. It was nearly impossible. Then there was the dictionary problem. Let's say for a moment that they did succeed. They found a specific brainwave pattern that reliably appeared every time a person looked at a picture of a dog. A breakthrough. But here's the problem. Is that dog pattern the same for everyone? Think about the word dog. For one person, that word might trigger feelings of love and warmth, memories of a childhood pet. For another person, it might trigger fear, a memory of being bitten as a child. For a third person, a veterinarian, it might trigger a cascade of anatomical and medical knowledge. The same simple stimulus, a dog, creates a completely unique and complex web of associations in every single brain. The brain doesn't have a universal dictionary where dog equals brainwave pattern, XYZ. Each brain has its own unique dictionary, written in the ink of its own experiences, memories, and emotions. So, a mind-reading machine wouldn't just need to be able to read signals. It would need to learn the unique language of every single individual's brain it was trying to read. This is a monumental task even for today's supercomputers, let alone the giant, clunky machines of the 1970s. Let's talk about those computers for a moment. Today, the smartphone in your pocket has more computing power than all of NASA had in 1969 when they put a man on the moon. The computers of the 1970s were room-sized beasts that processed information with agonizing slowness. They were powerful for their time, but analyzing the torrent of data from a single ease session in real time was a Herculean task. Imagine you are trying to translate a book from a language you don't know. You have a dictionary, but it's incomplete, and you have to do the translation using an old manual typewriter, looking up every single word one by one. That was the state of computational neuroscience in the 1970s. The ambition was there, but the tools to realize that ambition were decades away. So, what could they actually do? The research wasn't a complete failure. It just had to aim lower. Instead of decoding a specific thought like, "I will steal the secret plans tomorrow," they focused on much broader correlations. They could, with some success, link brain activity to external things. They could see the brain react to a flashing light. They could see the difference between a brain looking at a familiar face and an unfamiliar face. They could see the signatures of drowsiness or high alert. Let's do a little visualization to understand this. Imagine a thought is not a word, but a vast, shimmering, three-dimensional cloud of light and color. It's intricate, with swirling patterns and shifting hues. It's beautiful and impossibly complex. The technology of the 1970s was like trying to capture that cloud with a single black and white photograph taken from a great distance. You might see a smudge of light. You might be able to say, "Yes, there is a cloud in the sky." You might even be able to tell if it's a big cloud or a small one. But you would completely miss its depth, its color, its movement, its breathtaking complexity. You would capture the shadow, but miss the substance entirely. This is the quiet scientific truth at the heart of the scandal. The mind-reading machine was less a machine and more an aspiration, a goal on a distant horizon. The scientists and engineers working on these projects were brilliant pioneers, but they were ultimately limited by the physics, biology, and technology of their time. The mind, in its magnificent complexity, held its secrets close. It would not be unlocked with a simple key. And as you drift deeper into sleep, you can appreciate the wonderful, elegant complexity of your own mind, a universe of thought and feeling that, for all our searching, remains a profound and beautiful mystery. Every secret, no matter how well kept, has a tendency to find its way into the light. And in the 1970s, the American public was in no mood for government secrets. The decade was a crucible of disillusionment. The long and painful war in Vietnam had eroded trust. The Watergate scandal had shattered the image of an infallible presidency. A deep cynicism had taken root. People were beginning to question authority and demand transparency in a way they never had before. It was into this charged atmosphere that a new and terrifying story began to emerge, not in one sudden explosion, but in a series of leaks, rumors, and revelations. The story of the United States government trying to control the human mind. The name of the project was MKUltra. MKUltra was a real, documented, and deeply disturbing program run by the CIA from the 1950s through the 1970s. Its goals were straight out of a spy thriller, to develop methods of mind control for interrogation and psychological warfare. The methods were horrifying. They involved subjecting unwitting American citizens to psychological torture, sensory deprivation, hypnosis, and dangerous drugs like LSD. When the details of MKUltra were exposed to the public, primarily through the work of a congressional investigation called the Church Committee. The reaction was one of shock and outrage. It was a profound betrayal of public trust. The revelation of MKUltra created a powerful narrative. The government is not just spying on you, it's trying to get inside your head. It was the perfect backdrop of fear for the rumors about DARPA's brain-scanning experiments to land on. The idea of a mind-reading machine was no longer a distant science fiction concept. It felt like the next logical, terrifying step after MKUltra. If they were willing to use drugs to try and control the mind, why wouldn't they use technology to try and read it? Leaks began to trickle out. A disgruntled scientist might mention something to a journalist over a hushed dinner. A vague line item in a declassified budget report might raise an eyebrow. A source within the intelligence community might whisper a warning to a congressional aide. These were not headlines at first. They were fragments. But when pieced together, they painted a chilling picture. Imagine being an ordinary person in, say, 1975. You read the morning paper, and there's a story about the CIA secret drug experiments. You turn on the evening news, and there's a report about a congressional hearing on government surveillance. Then, a small article in a magazine speculates about psychotronic research and Pentagon-funded experiments to link brains to computers. The fear was no longer abstract. It felt real, and it felt close. The ethical debate that erupted was profound. It centered on a concept that philosophers call mental autonomy, or cognitive liberty. It's the simple, powerful idea that your mind is your own. Your thoughts, your beliefs, your feelings, your inner monologue. This is the last and most sacred bastion of privacy. It is the one place where you can be truly free. The government might be able to monitor your mail, tap your phone, or watch your house, but they couldn't get inside your skull. The prospect of a mind-reading machine, no matter how rudimentary, threatened to tear down that final wall. It raised a cascade of terrifying questions. If this technology were perfected, could it be used in court? Could your own thoughts be used as evidence against you? Could it be used for surveillance on a massive scale, to root out dissent before it even turned into action? Could a future authoritarian government use it to enforce political conformity, to ensure that everyone was thinking the right thoughts? These weren't just the fears of the public. They were deeply felt concerns within the scientific community as well. Scientists who had dedicated their lives to understanding the brain for the betterment of humanity were horrified at the thought of their work being twisted into a tool of coercion or control. Imagine our fictional neuroscientist, Dr. Evelyn Reed. She got into this field to help people with epilepsy or to understand memory. But now, she sees the direction her research is being pushed. The ethical weight of it would be immense. The backlash was not just about the technology itself, but about the secrecy surrounding it. The fact that these experiments were being conducted without public knowledge or consent was a core part of the scandal. It fed the narrative of a shadowy, unaccountable government operating outside the bounds of the law and morality. And so, the public and the press began to connect the dots. MKUltra, Project Stargate, vague reports of EG experiments. It all merged into one terrifying idea: the mind-reading machine. The scandal wasn't really about a specific working device. The scandal was the ambition, the fact that the government was secretly trying to cross this ultimate ethical line. The fear was not just that they would succeed, but that they had the audacity to even try. And in the quiet of the night, as you listen to these words, this story serves as a gentle reminder of the importance of those private, unseen boundaries and the vigilance required to protect the quiet, inner sanctuary of the human mind. When the tide of public opinion turns against a government program, the response is often swift and decisive, especially when that tide is powered by fears of mind control and secret experiments. The whispers and rumors about DARPA's brain research did not stay in the shadows forever. They eventually reached the ears of people in power, people who had the authority to demand answers. The government, which for years had operated with a high degree of secrecy, was about to have a very bright and uncomfortable spotlight shone upon it. The centerpiece of this reckoning was a series of investigations held by the United States Congress in the mid-1970s. The most famous of these was the Church Committee, named after its chairman, Senator Frank Church. The Church Committee's official job was to investigate abuses by the CIA, NC, and FBI. They were the ones who brought the full, ugly truth of MKULTRA into the public record. They held hearings, subpoenaed documents, and interviewed current and former intelligence officers. Imagine those hearing rooms. Grand, wood-paneled chambers in Washington, D.C., filled with reporters, cameras, and a palpable sense of tension. High-ranking officials, men used to operating in a world of secrets, were now forced to answer questions, under oath, in front of the entire nation. It was a moment of profound institutional soul-searching for America. In this climate, any project that even hinted at mind-reading or psychological manipulation became radioactive. It was politically toxic. A senator or a congressman couldn't afford to be seen as supporting such things. The public outcry was simply too great. So, the pressure came down from the top. The government's response was a masterclass in bureaucratic self-preservation. You don't get rid of a controversial project by putting out a press release that says, "We're shutting down our secret mind-reading program." That would be an admission of guilt. Instead, you make it quietly disappear. First, you scale it back. The funding, which once flowed freely, begins to dry up. A project that had a budget of millions might suddenly find its budget cut by 90%. It's not officially canceled, but it's starved of the resources it needs to continue. Next, you reclassify it. A project that was once a standalone program might be folded into a larger, more innocuous-sounding research initiative. Its name is changed. Its objectives are rewritten to sound more benign. Decoding brain signals for lie detection becomes research into the neurological correlates of stress. It's the same work, but with a new, less frightening label. The paper trail becomes confused and difficult to follow. Then you let the people go. The contracts for the university researchers, like our imagined Dr. Reed, are not renewed. The military personnel assigned to the project are reassigned to different duties. The team is broken up. The institutional knowledge is scattered. The project dies not with a bang, but with the quiet closing of office doors and the packing of boxes. Many of the most sensitive files related to these projects were likely either destroyed or, more likely, buried so deep in classified archives that they might never see the light of day. They are stamped with top secret and filed away in a secure vault, a time capsule of a controversial era. The official story became that these projects were, for the most part, failures. The government would admit that, yes, some exploratory research was conducted, but the technology was found to be unfeasible, and the results were inconclusive. Therefore, the programs were discontinued. This explanation has the benefit of being, for the most part, true. As we've discussed, the scientific limitations were very real, but it's a convenient truth. It allows the government to sidestep the thorny ethical questions. They didn't have to answer for whether the project was right or wrong, only for whether it worked. And since it didn't really work, the case could be closed. Think of it like a powerful river that has been dammed. The flow of money and political support is cut off. The river doesn't vanish instantly, but it slows to a trickle. The vast reservoir of research and ambition gradually evaporates, leaving behind a dry riverbed with just a few scattered pools of water, the few declassified documents and whistleblower accounts that are left for historians to find. The great mind-reading projects of the 1970s were suppressed. They were driven underground by a perfect storm of public backlash, political pressure, and their own technological shortcomings. The scandal forced a retreat. The dream of reading the mind was, for a time, put back on the shelf. The government had flown too close to the sun, and for the sake underscore of its own survival, it had to pull back. And as you rest in the darkness, let your mind be still. Feel the peace of this moment, a quiet testament to the idea that some frontiers, perhaps, are meant to remain unexplored. To truly understand why a project as audacious as a mind-reading machine could even be contemplated, we must immerse ourselves once more in the unique and tense atmosphere of the 1970s. It's easy for us, looking back from a future filled with technological wonders, to see these projects as strange or misguided. But they were a product of their time, a direct reflection of the deep and pervasive paranoia of the Cold War. Let's take a moment to paint a mental picture of this era. It was a world split in two, divided by an ideological and physical barrier known as the Iron Curtain. On one side was the United States and its allies, champions of capitalism and democracy. On the other, the Soviet Union and its allies, committed to communism. These two superpowers were locked in a global standoff. They never fought a direct, large-scale war with each other, which is why it was called a Cold War. But the tension was constant, a low-grade fever that infected every aspect of society. Children in American schools practiced duck and cover drills, hiding under their desks in case of a nuclear attack. Families built fallout shelters in their backyards. The news was filled with stories of espionage, of spies and counter-spies, of defections and secret intelligence. It was a time of deep, existential anxiety. The enemy was not just a foreign army. It was an ideology, a way of thinking that felt alien and threatening. This fear created a powerful psychological pressure on the government and its intelligence agencies. There was a constant nagging question: what are the Soviets up to? And because the Soviet Union was such a closed-off, secretive society, it was incredibly difficult to find out. This information vacuum was often filled with a dangerous habit of the intelligence world called mirror imaging. This is the tendency to assume that your adversary is thinking and acting just like you are. So, if American scientists at DARPA were brainstorming about using brainwaves for lie detection, it was natural to assume that Soviet scientists in some secret lab deep in Siberia were doing the exact same thing. And what if they were ahead of us? What if they were on the verge of a breakthrough in mind control or psychological warfare? This fear of a brain gap, similar to the earlier fear of a missile gap, was a powerful motivator. It created a sense of urgency. We had to pursue this research, not necessarily because we wanted to use it offensively, but because we had to understand it defensively. We couldn't risk being surprised again, like we had been with Sputnik. Popular culture from this period is a fantastic window into this mindset. The movies and books of the time were filled with stories of brainwashing and mind control. Think of the classic film The Manchurian Candidate, where an American soldier is captured and brainwashed by communists to become a political assassin, activated by a simple trigger phrase. Or think of the many spy thrillers of authors like John le Carre, where the battle is not one of fists, but of psychological manipulation and betrayal. These weren't just stories. They were reflections of a genuine public and governmental anxiety. They made the fantastic seem plausible. This blend of genuine geopolitical tension and speculative science fiction created a fertile ground for projects that pushed the boundaries of ethics and science. The logic was something like this. This idea of reading thoughts sounds crazy. It sounds like something out of a comic book. But what if it's not? What if the enemy is working on it? Can we afford not to investigate it? In the high-stakes game of the Cold War, even a 1% chance of such a technology being real was enough to justify a secret research program. It was a strange marriage of cutting-edge science and almost mystical belief. On one hand, you had brilliant neuroscientists meticulously measuring brainwaves. On the other, you had intelligence officers worried about psychic spies and brainwashing rays. Both were fueled by the same underlying paranoia. So, when we look back at this scandal of the mind-reading machine, it's essential to see it not just as a story about technology, but as a story about fear. It was born from a deep-seated anxiety about the unknown intentions of a powerful enemy. The humming machines in those quiet labs were, in a way, monuments to that fear. They were attempts to make the unseen visible, to make the unknowable known, to find some measure of certainty in a world that felt deeply uncertain and unsafe. It's a reminder that sometimes our greatest creations are driven not by our hopes, but by our deepest anxieties. And as you continue to drift, let go of any tension, any anxiety. Feel the safety and certainty of your own comfortable space, a quiet harbor in the long, dark night. The story does not end in the 1970s with the quiet shuttering of those secret programs. The dream of understanding the brain, of creating a link between mind and machine, did not die. It simply went dormant for a while, waiting for the technology to catch up with the ambition and for the ethical landscape to mature. Today, we are living in the future that the scientists of the 1970s could only dream of, and the progress in neuroscience has been nothing short of breathtaking. Let's revisit our old friend, the EE. The basic principle is the same, but today's EEG systems are infinitely more sensitive and sophisticated. Instead of a few electrodes, they can use hundreds, creating a much higher resolution map of the brain's electrical activity. But the true revolution has been the partnership between these brain-scanning tools and a powerful new ally, artificial intelligence and machine learning. Think of it this way. The EEG of the 1970s was like a single person trying to listen to and understand the roar of that stadium crowd. Today's approach is like having a team of thousands of superhuman listeners, each one assigned to a specific section of the crowd. These listeners are AI algorithms. They can listen to the complex, chaotic noise of the brain and learn to pick out incredibly subtle patterns that are completely invisible to a human observer. This has led to some remarkable achievements that sound like they are straight out of science fiction. For instance, scientists can now show a person a picture, say, of a bird. While the person is looking at the picture, a powerful fMRI scanner, the mature version of that blood flow idea from the 70s, records their brain activity. An eye then analyzes that pattern of activity and can reconstruct a blurry, dreamlike image of what the person was seeing. It's not a perfect photograph, but it is unmistakably a bird. It is a form of technological telepathy. In another amazing application, researchers have developed brain-computer interfaces, or BCIs, that can help people who are paralyzed and unable to speak. A person can simply imagine writing a letter with their hand. A small sensor implanted in their brain picks up the neural signals for that intended movement. A computer then decodes these signals and types the letter on a screen. People are able to communicate, to write emails, to connect with the world again, all using only the power of their thoughts. This is the positive legacy of that early, controversial research. The focus has shifted dramatically. The vast majority of brain-computer interface work today is not funded by spy agencies, but by medical research institutions. The goal is not to interrogate, but to heal. Not to control, but to restore. And with this new power comes a new sense of responsibility. The ethical lessons learned from the controversies of the 1970s have been deeply ingrained in the scientific community. Today, any research involving human subjects in brain scanning is subject to rigorous ethical review boards. The principles of informed consent, privacy, and data security are paramount. Let's take a moment to highlight one of the many brilliant minds working in this field today. A scientist like Dr. Ananya Sharma, a composite character representing a new generation of neuroethicists. She doesn't just build BCIs. Her entire research focus is on making them safe and fair. She works on creating neural firewalls to protect a user's thoughts from being hacked. She develops policies to ensure that the data from a person's brain is owned and controlled by that person alone. Her work acknowledges the lesson of the 1970s, that the power to read from the brain comes with an immense responsibility to protect the person. This new generation of scientists includes ethicists, sociologists, and legal scholars working alongside the engineers, ensuring that the how is always guided by the why. DARPA, believe it or not, is still involved in brain research, but their approach is very different now. Many of their programs are public, their goals are transparent, and they are overwhelmingly focused on medical applications for soldiers. For example, they fund research into advanced prosthetic limbs that can be controlled by a person's thoughts, just like a real limb. They are also working on ways to help soldiers recover from traumatic brain injuries. The work continues, but it is done in the light of day, with a clear focus on helping and healing. So the technology that was once feared as a tool for government control is now emerging as a powerful tool for human liberation and recovery. The crude, humming machines of the 1970s have evolved into sleek, sophisticated systems that can give a voice to the voiceless and movement to the paralyzed. The dream is still alive, but it is a kinder, more compassionate, and more open dream than the one conceived in the paranoid shadows of the Cold War. And as you lie here, on the edge of sleep, you can feel a sense of gentle optimism, a quiet hope that our greatest tools can, in the end, be guided by our better angels. As our journey through this quiet history comes to a close, let's take a final, gentle look back at the legacy of this strange and fascinating episode. The scandal of the mind-reading machine is not a simple story with a clear hero and villain. It is a tapestry woven from threads of fact, fear, speculation, and scientific reality. Its legacy is complex, and it continues to echo in our modern world in subtle but important ways. The most important thing to remember is that the scandal was never about a real working mind-reading machine. Such a device did not exist in the 1970s, and it does not exist today. The true scandal, the real controversy, was about something more fundamental. It was about the collision of three powerful forces: the limitless ambition of scientific innovation, the desperate paranoia of military and intelligence interests, and the sacred fundamental right to individual privacy. The legacy of these programs is, in part, a cautionary tale. It stands as a powerful reminder of what can happen when scientific research is conducted in secret, without public oversight, and driven by fear rather than by a desire for human betterment. The story of MyCultura and the rumored DARPA brain projects became a permanent stain on the public's trust in government, a trust that in many ways has never been fully repaired. It created a healthy and necessary skepticism about secret government research that continues to this day. The story also left behind a kind of speculative lore, a modern myth. The idea of a suppressed, secret technology is a powerful one. It taps into our fascination with conspiracies and hidden knowledge. The mind-reading machine became a piece of folklore, a symbol for our deepest anxieties about technology and government overreach. It lives on in movies, books, and late-night conversations, a ghost story about the dangers of unchecked power. And while many of the sensationalized claims go far beyond the verified facts, the story serves a purpose. It acts as a cultural immune system, keeping us vigilant about the ethical boundaries of science and technology. But the legacy is not purely negative. The controversies of the 1970s forced a necessary and long overdue conversation about neuroethics. It forced scientists, politicians, and the public to ask difficult questions. What are the rules for exploring the human brain? Who gets to see the data? How do we protect a person's cognitive liberty? The strict ethical guidelines that govern neuroscience today were forged in the fire of these past scandals. In a very real way, the mistakes of the past helped to create a safer and more responsible future for brain research. The ghost of the mind-reading machine now haunts every ethics review board, a silent observer ensuring that the line is never crossed again. Finally, the story highlights an ongoing and perhaps eternal tension. The tension between our desire for security and our need for freedom. The tension between the push for technological progress and the pull of our moral compass. The Cold War logic that drove these projects has not entirely disappeared from the world. Nations still compete. Intelligence agencies still seek an edge. The only difference is that today, the technology is 1,000 times more powerful than it was in the 1970s. Let us close with one last visualization. Imagine your own thoughts, not as words on a screen or signals to be decoded, but as a gentle, flowing river. It is constantly moving, constantly changing. Sometimes it is clear and calm. Sometimes it is turbulent and muddy. This river is your own private inner world. The story of the mind-reading machine is the story of an attempt to dam that river, to measure it, to chart it, to control its flow. The project failed, and the river continues to flow, wild and free. The ultimate legacy of this scandal is a renewed appreciation for the mystery and sanctity of that inner world. The human mind, for all our searching and all our science, remains the last true frontier. It is a universe of immense beauty, complexity, and privacy. And perhaps its most profound secrets are not meant to be decoded by a machine, but to be discovered gently and quietly by ourselves. So as you finally drift away into the peaceful depths of sleep, Let that river of thought flow on. Do not try to direct it or judge it. Simply let it be. Let it carry you into your dreams, into that quiet, secure space that is, and always will be, yours and yours alone. Good night.